Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sports Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Rogers Harrison, joined this week by Brian Koperick. Brian, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Rogers. How are you?
Great. Happy to have you back after
It's good to be back.
your hiatus for a while. Brian, we're going to talk a little baseball because it's baseball season.
Sounds fun.
We're going to talk about professional baseball in Minneapolis.
Ooh, okay.
We're going to talk about also St. Paul, too. Why not?
Why not?
Right? So, professional baseball in Minneapolis began with the Minneapolis Millers, who played in the minor leagues from the late 1800s through the mid 20th century. Now, here's the thing about the Millers. So, do you remember when we were talking about the St. Louis Browns?
Yeah.
And do you remember when we were talking about the Western League?
Yep.
Which would become the American League. Remember that?
Yeah.
So in 1894, the Minneapolis Millers were part of that Western League. And then they continued to play in the Western League through 1900 when it was renamed to the American League. However, following the 1900 season, several cities were abandoned for bigger markets, and some cities recently vacated by the National League, including Minneapolis. So the Minneapolis Millers were kind of left out in the cold type of thing.
Oh.
See what I'm saying? So
teams left the Western League.
Well, the Western
the league.
Well, the Western League became the American League.
Okay.
And so Ban Johnson, we talked about him, the commissioner of the mission, is like, we're a major league now, or so we can't have these podunk towns. And I guess Minneapolis
was one of the podunks.
Was one of them. So, for instance, the Kansas City Blues went over to Washington, D.C. to become the Washington Senators.
Okay.
All right. Now, that is going to be important. The Blues coming over and becoming the Washington Senators in the early days of the American League. All right?
Okay.
So put a pin
in
that. So, what does that mean? That means, the Minneapolis Millers survived, but they went over to the American Association, and they were in the American Association from 1902 to 1960, which is a minor league. Now, I don't know if you remember, but at one point, AAA had three leagues. They had the Pacific Coast League, they had the American Association, and they had the International League.
Okay.
Now, the International League at that time was exactly that, because you had franchises in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto.
all North American, but
so it was
Canada,
it was a international type of thing. So now, did you know that Ted Williams played for the Minneapolis Millers?
I did not.
Did you know that Willie Mays played for the?
No. So now we're starting to see the significance.
Did you know that Yaz played?
For the Millers?
Yeah.
They were a hot training bed then.
Yeah. Now, Minneapolis has also been known to, and they hosted the Minneapolis Millerettes. The Millerettes were a girls' baseball team, and that happened in the 40s.
Awesome.
Kind of like a league of their own type of thing.
Right. That basically what a league of their own was about.
Yes.
That women's league.
That women's league, yeah, or other various leagues that popped up, so the guys could go off to fight the Germans.
Right.
As they say. So let's talk about the Minneapolis Millers, shall we?
Let's do it.
But you probably want to talk a bit about the Millerettes, but get your mind out of the gutter because we're going to talk about the Millers.
Okay, fine.
All right. All right. So basically, you've got this minor league baseball team, the Minneapolis Millers, and they're playing in the American Association, like I said. Now, when the minor leagues started to form, when the minor leagues weren't competing with Major League Baseball anymore, and were starting to become farm cities for these major league teams.
Okay.
This is what the Millers were the top affiliates for from 1936 to 38. And then again from 58 to 60, they were affiliated with the Boston Red Sox.
Okay.
And from 46 to 57, they're affiliated with the New York Giants. So basically, I think that's freaking impressive. So for basically 59, 58, maybe 60 years, the Millers are basically affiliated with two major league clubs.
Two pretty successful major league clubs.
Right. And, because, today you might like, 10 years they were affiliated with this, and then 10 years they're affiliated with this,
Yeah,
and then
it's
10
all
years.
over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's why Yaz played for the Millers and Willie Mays and
Ted.
stuff. Right. Now, excuse me. All right, so as we talked about in our previous podcast about the St. Louis Browns, when major league teams had city rights to their minor league affiliates.
Right.
And so before the before the New York Giants moved to San Francisco, they were thinking about moving to Minneapolis.
Okay.
Because they had the rights at the time. Right? But, Branch Rickey convinced the owner of the Giants, just come out west with me. Just come out west. And so hence San Francisco. So Minneapolis almost became a major league city in 1958 because that's when the Giants moved. Now, as part of that move to the Bay Area, that is why they had to they swapped with the Red Sox for the city rights. Now this is what I'm not sure about, why Minneapolis just couldn't remain the top affiliate for the Giants. I do know that when the Giants did move west, one of their AAA affiliates was Phoenix. And I don't know if Phoenix was in 1958 was one of their top affiliates, but so I don't understand why they had to switch it back to the Red Sox. Maybe it was some agreement. I don't know if the Red Sox
that they had previous or something.
I don't know if the Red Sox AAA was in San Francisco. It could have been. Also around at that time was the St. Paul Saints.
And so two minor league clubs in
Well-
the same town?
Well, yeah. No. Because, Minneapolis and St. Paul are right close to each other, but they are considered two different cities.
Yeah, but they...
Right, but yeah. In fact, it was considered a rivalry, a little heated crosstown rivalry. The two clubs played streetcar doubleheaders on holidays,
Okay.
playing one game in each city.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
That would be awesome if, Murfreesboro had a single A team and Smyrna had one. And then we could do that.
Fans, Brian Koperick is talking about two cities in Middle Tennessee.
You're right. Right. You're right, Rogers. You're right. But I'm just saying, like, that would be pretty cool. Like,
Yes.
Just to have that kind of a rivalry and then something fun to do, like to take the streetcar from one game to the next game and all that.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be really cool.
Now, here's a little side note about the St. Paul Saints. The St. Paul Saints came back as an independent team when the American Association came back as a independent league. Now, all right, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So, I believe it was 1998 when you had three AAA leagues, and they merged into two: the Pacific Coast League and the International League. And so, basically, the American Association teams that were on the east side of the country went over to the International League, and those that were more of a Western went over to the PCL.
Okay.
And then they have since done some merging again. And some of those teams that went over to the PCL have gone to the International League. Like, for instance, Iowa, the Iowa Cubs, AAA affiliate of Chicago, originally went over to the PCL in '98 from the American Association, and then now has gone back to the International League, mainly because of the fact that Iowa didn't consider themselves to be on the Pacific Coast.
Right.
And so Iowa, Omaha, and some others went back over to international. And yeah, it's a long plane ride or bus ride, whatever. I think they're doing planes now. From Omaha to Buffalo for an International League game, but they've done the schedule, so
they've worked it out.
All right, let's get to it.
Let's do it.
So now we're in the Giants have moved to San Francisco, and they did not move to
Minneapolis.
They did not move to Minneapolis. You've got the Minneapolis Millers that are still going strong, and they go strong until the 1960.
Okay.
And you're probably wondering, well, what happened in 1961? I mean, what's going on? What's going on? Well, let's go back and talk about the Washington Senators, shall we?
Oh, yep. You said put a pin in that.
Put a pin in that. Now, the franchise was founded in Washington, D.C. in 1901 as the Washington Senators, a member of the American League.
Okay.
Now, remember, this team had moved from Kansas City in the late 1800s, and they were known as the Kansas City Blues. But when the Western League became the American League, they went over and became the Washington Senators.
Washington.
The franchise won World Series in 1924 as the Senators, and that is the only World Series that the Senators had won. The Senators had a period of success in the 20s and 30s. They were led by Walter Johnson. Do you remember Walter Johnson? He was a great pitcher for the Senators.
I was going to say pitcher. So,
yep.
Yeah, I do remember him.
Johnson in 1924 won 23 games. Which I don't think you would have today.
No, it'd be tough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They, like I said, they won the 1924 World Series, beating the New York Giants. Oh, remember them? They went to the World Series in 1925, but lost to the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Arr.
Yeah.
Matey.
After Walter Johnson retired in 27, he was hired as manager of the Senators.
Oh, okay.
So you got a pretty good deal. So, the Senators were owned by Archie Griffith. And then he died in 1955. So his nephew and adopted son, Calvin, took over the team.
Okay.
So Calvin sold Griffith Stadium to the city of Washington and then leased it back.
To raise capital.
Yeah, and so he wouldn't have to be, he wouldn't be on the hook for all the repairs, let's say.
Right.
Now, when he did this was speculation the team was planning to move, as the Boston Braves, the St. Louis Browns, and the Philadelphia Athletics had done in recent years.
Oh.
The Braves to Milwaukee. We know where the St. Louis Browns went.
Right.
Baltimore. And the Philadelphia Athletics went to Kansas City. Now, in 1957, they had an early flirtation with the city of San Francisco. But we all know that's where the Giants moved in 58. So Griffith began courting Minneapolis St. Paul. What? Now, he began courting them, and Minneapolis St. Paul said, all right, here's an offer. And he was like, no, that's awful. I'm not taking that.
Try again.
Yeah. So, now, meanwhile, his attendance in Washington, D.C. was actually going up. 425,000 in 55 to 475,000 in 58. And jumped to 615,000 in 59. So people are getting, they're coming to see the Senators, but they're starting to panic, I guess, because, it's like, oh my gosh, we may lose our team. Now, part of the Minnesota deal guaranteed 1 million fans a year for 3 years. Plus the potential to double TV and radio money.
Okay.
I don't know how the Minneapolis St. Paul could guarantee them 1 million fans a year for 3 years, but
they did.
It's like if you run for like election in high school, and you make all these promises as your president. I'm going to make better food in the cafeteria.
Right. You're going to get free snacks every Tuesday.
Yeah. Like, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to vote for you. Like, that's not going to happen because you have no power.
Right.
So the American League said, no. You're not. You're staying right where you are. But in 1960, a deal was reached. American League changed their mind. Major League Baseball, because at this time, the two leagues were under the same umbrella.
Right.
But they were still two separate. Major League Baseball agreed to let Griffin move his team to Minneapolis-St. Paul region and allowed a new Senators team to be formed in Washington for the 61 season.
Okay.
So if you're so here's the thing is, you got season attendance going up in Washington for the Senators. Major League Baseball sees that and says, all right, original Senators, you can go, but we will have a new Senators come in 1961. So as far as the fans were concerned, the Senators franchise was still there, still going on, but you've got a whole new crop of players, right?
Okay.
And side note, Ted Williams was the manager of the second Washington Senators.
Oh.
What?
Okay.
Now, I've come to the messy stuff. To the messy stuff here in our thing.
Messy, huh?
Messy.
There's always a messy when we start talking about these teams.
So I just want to preference this. I'm about to say this is a quote from Calvin Griffith about why he moved the team to Minnesota. You ready? Here's a quote. I'll tell you why we came to Minnesota. It was when I found out you only had 15,000 blacks here. Black people don't go to ball games, but they'll fill up a wrestling ring and put up such a chant it'll scare you to death. It's unbelievable. We came here because you've got good, hard-working white people here. End of quote.
Man. Today he would have been crucified for saying
Not exactly the reason why you want to move
Right.
to.
Right.
So here we go, friends. The Minnesota Twins, right? Minnesota Twins, 1961, and they are still going strong today.
Yeah?
Now let's connect the dots. Minneapolis Millers, in the Western League, go over to the American League, right? But are only in there 1 year because the league doesn't think, it's a good city. They want
Right.
bigger cities, right? And so one of the cities that one of these minor league teams goes to is the Washington, D.C., where the Senators are born. And that team becomes the Minnesota Twins.
Okay.
I just think that it's all, it all comes back to you, I guess.
Yeah.
Because the Senators were the former Kansas City Blues, and so they weren't the Minneapolis Millers. But it's
Right.
like justice is served. Like you think we're too small, but just you wait, because in 1961 we're going to be the right size.
Right. Right.
So, ta-da! Minnesota Twins. Minnesota Twins. Kirby Puckett,
Yep.
big time Twin. And I think as a Tiger fan growing up and watching the Tigers, I'm sure you saw the Twins a lot.
Yep.
Paul Molitor played for the Twins for a time. Jack Morris pitched for the Twins.
Unfortunately, because that meant he wasn't with us.
Yes, he was also a Tiger. Twins won the World Series against the St. Louis Cardinals in '87.
Yeah.
And then they, won the series in 1991 against the Braves, but that was controversial because
Because you're a Braves fan.
Well, because the first baseman threw Ron Gann off the first base or whatever. We don't talk about that. All right, so the name Twins is derived from the Twin Cities because the two cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Now, let's go back to the St. Paul Saints, that were independent league in the Second American Association. When Major League Baseball reconfigured all their minor league teams and got rid of some, they added a couple from the independent ranks. They added the St. Paul Saints, and they added a team down in Texas, which became the Houston Astros affiliate. But the St. Paul Saints became the Minnesota Twins affiliate.
Okay.
So they are right there. So
That's
when you
pretty wild.
when you get
don't
called
see that very often.
when you get called up to Minnesota, the majors,
hop in your car and
just go
run across the street.
right. The Braves and their AAA affiliate is like 12 miles apart,
Oh, really?
and I think this is even closer because of the two cities. But so you could you could be like playing for the the St. Paul Saints, right? And have an apartment in St. Paul, and you get called up because somebody is on a rehab or something, injury, and you don't have to move, and then you can just go play for a couple, and then you'll go right back to AAA, and then you're like,
no big deal.
No big deal. So it's kind of neat. Kent Herbeck is the one I was thinking about. As push Ron Gant off the first base. Anyway.
No bitterness there.
No bitterness. So that's it. That's just a quick look at professional baseball in Minneapolis.
You know, it's pretty cool that, like, I mean, when you think about it, all these cities, all these towns, all this stuff with all the minor leagues and baseball, but when you're talking about this particular city and the franchises there and the impactful players that you could name a handful of them right off the bat that have that came from there, and that's pretty cool. Like Ted Williams having his history there, not only as a player but as a coach or general manager, that type of stuff. So
no, I mean Ted Williams was the manager of the Washington Senators, the second Washington Senators.
Right.
So he never
there.
He never managed it, but he did play his AAA
there
in Minneapolis for the Millers.
I had that mixed up. So, anyways, but just pretty cool that the Twins have such a good history.
Yep, and remember they played in the Metrodome.
Yep.
At that trash bag outfield. Remember that? And then they moved into Target Field, I believe, in 2010.
Wow, has it been that long?
Yeah, 2010. They've been in Target Field, which I understand is a pretty nice venue.
Yeah.
I've never been there.
I haven't either, but when you see it on TV, it looks nice.
Yeah, and they don't have a trash bag outfield wall, so I don't have to worry about that.
I'm sure that was in the contract when they built it.
Yes.
No trash bags for the outfield wall.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rogers, I've enjoyed it.
All right. Before we go, tell everybody where they can find you, Brian.
Yeah. So you can get me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Random Things with BK. And and Gmail at randomthingswithbk@gmail.com.
All right. I am Rogers Harrison. I'm on Blue Sky as 318 North. I want to remind you that this is a Podbean production. They are our platform, but we are available on any of the platforms that you may subscribe to. We are commercial free. That way you can get this podcast in and out, maybe on your way to work, maybe on your way home, maybe while you're shaving or eating breakfast or eating dinner or whatever. So I just want to remind you about that. We'll have another exciting episode of the Sports Deep Dive podcast for you next time. But for now, so long, everyone.